hold music. You want to avoid it, and so do your customers. So say goodbye to hold music and hello to faster, smarter support with Salesforce. Make service more personal and agents more productive using built-in trusted AI. Then watch costs and wait times drop and satisfaction soar. Support customers in a whole new way with Service GPT. Learn how at salesforce.com/servicegpt.
Welcome to a nature-backed podcast of Single Earth. In this series, we are talking with investors about their vision of the new green world. My name is Tarmo Virki, and in this episode 5, I'm talking with Shikha Ahluwalia from Balderton on how one of the top venture capital firms is going green and changing the world. Enjoy the show.
I think the question everybody is asking these days is that after the Glasgow COP26 meeting, the climate change is becoming bigger and bigger issue for the world. Seems that we are not really doing as much as we could or should with the climate change. At the same time, we have a number of the startups coming into this sector. How do you see this kind of the climate change challenge playing at the moment?
That's a really, really good question. I think to answer the first half of your question, or what you were alluding to, I think we're definitely not doing enough to tackle climate change. And I believe that we as investors and the investing scene in general has a unique responsibility to address the issues of the next, well, not even 50 years, the next 8 years until 2030. And I believe sort of, I'd like to sort of mention something that one of my colleagues said to me upon joining, and asked that colleague, why, what is this, unique thought that you would give as a piece of advice to the next generation of investors. And he said, well, Shikha, yes, it's venture capital, but ultimately we all need to learn to be less greedy and more think about the world that we are building for our generations to come. And that's not 5 generations down the line. I'm talking about our children, my children, your children, and it's very, very near. So I think that the idea that investors need to be doing much, much more is super important. And I believe actually that returns in terms of impact on the planet, in terms of impact on the climate, are returns that need to be measured alongside financial returns to give a holistic view of the world. Does that maybe it doesn't fully answer your question, but sorry,
No.
What was the second half of the question?
But it really makes sense. Is there actually kind of good metrics to measure those returns on the sustainability?
Yeah, look, I think there are 2 layers here. Number one is, of course, how investors, have, or actually, I can actually only talk about how we do it at Balderton. I think that would be much easier for me to speak about, because that's what we've been seeing and what I've been working with. And so I think that there are multiple layers how you can measure an impact, a climate impact, or a sustainability impact more broadly of an investment. And I think that number one, really, before we start about talking around, okay, how can you measure that social impact, that sustainable impact, that climate impact of an investment? The very first thing that you need to do is anchor into your investment decision making. Who are the companies you're picking to invest in? And I think this is step 0. I think we always talk about returns and how to measure the returns, whereas we should be asking, how do we set up a process in a way that it becomes top of the agenda to invest into climate-friendly companies as part of our investment decision making. And I think this is far more important than impact, than measuring the impact, because the ultimate question is, how do you really measure impact? And it's not a straightforward piece, right? And sort of putting it into LP reporting is one, but I think step 0 is really showing that you consistently are serious about investing into the right companies, and the right companies are companies for whom it is top of the agenda to have an impact, a positive impact on climate. So what we have done at Balderton, for example, is there is a part of our investment memorandum that we write for each and every company that we're looking at more closely. And part of that investment memorandum is always to what extent does that company meet or fulfill our goals with regards to a sustainable future. So, Tarmo, you may not know this, but I think what might be interesting for the listeners as well at some point is that we have launched the Sustainable Future Goals at Balderton almost, I'd say, a year and a half ago. That was in late 2020. I just pasted the link for your reference. And this is essentially our own framework of 10 different sustainable future goals that is inspired by the ESG framework of the EU. And that doesn't really, only talk about how we can have an impact on the environment, but it sort of, looks at multiple axes of implementation of how we see sustainable future goals and how, what is the impact that we can make as investors. And so there are 3 layers that these 10 sustainable future goals can really, be taken into action. And number 1 is sort of what can we do in our own company, because we're also a company at the end of the day. What can we do in the fund? So, for example, reducing or not having single-use plastic as an example. The second would be what can our existing portfolio companies do to further the agenda of the sustainable future. And number 3, and which I think is most important because it's forward-looking. There's only so much damage control you can do in what you've already done. But I think forward-looking is super exciting because so number 3 is essentially, to what extent do potentially new portfolio companies fulfill the sustainable future goals, or to what extent is it important for them? And I mean, I'm super happy to walk you through the sustainable future goals in general, or you can just probably link it out later on. But essentially, we have, we've stipulated 10 different goals for us. That is along the environmental axis. It includes climate action, responsible consumption, the rise of green cities and renewable energy. On the social side, it's around fairness and equal opportunities, gender equality, diversity and inclusion. I love that we at Balderton have a gender-blind paternity or maternity leave policy. That's amazing. I think everyone should have that. And then we're also including good health and well-being, especially mental well-being, as part of our social sustainable future goals, lifelong learning. And on the governance side, because I believe we live in a world that has more and more data and more things happening around. So I think governance and compliance becomes a really, really huge topic for humanity and mankind in general. How does the human really want to interact with data going forwards? And so 2 of our sustainable future goals are around maintaining highest ethical and governance standards. And our final sustainable future goal, number 10, is around data rights, because we believe that data rights are human rights. This is just I could talk for hours around this. And we've also done a ton of measuring around our sustainable future goals. But let me know if you have any specific question here.
I think it's really kind of a crucial part is to have not only climate in those goals, of course.
100%. 100%.
Climate is kind of needed for us to exist in the future also. But at the same time, if we just fix the climate, there is so much more which are kind of lost by that time. You said that you talked about how kind of early in the process it's important to kind of get things right and kind of when you invest in new companies that you look at their environmental agenda or their views of their sustainability going forward. Maybe you could draw some examples of your recent investments, some kind of concrete examples.
Yeah, I look. Here's the thing: I'm a bit in a limbo here because some of these investments they haven't, they have not been announced yet. They're not public. So I'm super happy to reveal the spaces and why we think those spaces are important. And also, super happy to reveal some early companies that we've invested in that space. So, starting from a more, I'd say, green tech, I call it green tech in general, that sort of, describes all of the areas of climate, consumption, food, all of these things. So I think an investment that we did quite early on is an investment into InFarm. That's a sort of modern day vertical farming company, originally based out of Berlin, but now moving to Amsterdam. And so what I really love about the InFarm model, so I mean, for everyone's benefit, so you can usually see if you're a consumer, for example, in Central Europe or specifically in Germany, if you go to any supermarket, mostly Rewe, for example, or Edeka, you will find that you have these vertical farms placed within the supermarkets and essentially growing herbs and salads on site rather than having them grow in remote places or even in glass houses far off and then transporting them every single time back and forth to the supermarket. That's a huge amount of carbon emission that happens there. And so we sort of essentially shortened the supply chain and massively reduce the carbon impact by farming the herbs and salads in the supermarkets. And of course, it's also possible with so many more different categories and so many more different types of groceries. And this is what I find really exciting because it's not this far away idea of I'm working on calculating emissions and then mitigating them and then reducing them, because I feel that's a layer that's maybe great for companies and that's coming now more and more. But what is, I guess, even more important is how do you make these solutions actionable and viable for the consumer? And I think this is where really InFarm comes in, and we've quite early on invested into InFarm. And I think that's really one of our landmark investments in that space. And I think to discuss something more recent, we've also recently invested into Sweep. That's a French company in the carbon space. And that's also an investment we're really, really excited about. So this is more along the lines of, it's a B2B solution, going in with carbon tracking, with carbon mitigation. And that's something that's quite exciting, and working on an API first method here. So I think these are sort of one of the more recent investments, but we've also invested into a company that is in the alternative food space and replacing meat, because obviously beef is one of the highest carbon emissions drivers out of the consumption. So that's definitely something we're aware of. I mean, these are three companies that I can disclose, and two of them very, very recently. That they're more in the pipe, and some of them we have signed. But yeah.
You mentioned carbon. I probably got kind of deeper into this sector and field listening at the end of the year, the NOAH conference from Zurich, where it seemed like there was dozens and dozens of carbon companies on stage talking about what's going on in this sector. Is carbon somehow the red hot burning topic of this industry? Or, I mean, in a way, it's the most easily measurable part. It's the one where the governments have done something to kind of limit it, but at the same time, it's only part of the game, right?
Agree, it's part of the game, but at the same time, you've got regulatory wins that require you to reduce and commit to carbon reduction targets. So I think the need now versus 10 years ago for companies is much more stark, which is giving rise to all of these startups to try and understand, to try and help and understand companies. How can we sort of, measure, mitigate, and improve our carbon footprint? And, it's not like it wasn't possible 10 years ago. I mean, there've always been free tools out there. That's not new, right? But I think what's new is that, maybe 10 years ago, only a fraction of companies cared, but, in 2022, a lot more companies care and have to care. And so this gives rise to solutions that are more user-friendly, that are more sort of integrated into tech, and that beautifully, also stack up with your own infrastructure. So, but I believe, to be honest, someone, this has not just been a recent hype. I think this has been a hype of the last, I'd say 14, 15 months, really. And I've been observing this, but I think it's really important to tell and see here. And I'm always a big fan of mission-driven founders. And I think for this topic in particular, it really requires a founding team and a set of principles that that is a team that is really in it to build it for the impact and build it for the long term, and not because it's a new hot topic. Because the truth is, it should have been a hot topic for the last 20 years where it wasn't.
Yeah, absolutely true. As a journalist, I started really to get into this field already during the Kyoto negotiations. So I've been reading my stories from 25 years ago or 20 years ago, which read pretty much the same. The challenge was pretty much there and known at the time, but on a global scale, not much has happened. Your first target of those 10 list was urgent climate action.
Yes.
I mean, if you try to delve a little bit deeper into that one, what are you guys doing there?
Yeah, for sure. I think that the first thing that is super important is you need to at least practice what you preach. And I think that's really step zero. And so, I mean, what we've been doing on Balderton's end, that we've been offsetting of our own footprint. And to be honest, in 2020 and 2021, sorry, I have this dog. I'm dog sitting today, and she is just sorry, she is growling at me because she wants to be part of the conversation. Sorry, that's from our portfolio company. Shout out to Arrive. I'm taking care of their dog today because we're nice investors. So what you were saying, I think it's super important to practice what you preach, and what we're doing at Balderton is we're offsetting our own carbon footprint. And I guess I could mention a couple of metrics here. So last year, from the tons of carbons that we offset, the average price for the offset for us was 54.4 euros, and that's for 2020. But I also just want to be mindful here that, of course, 2020 carbon impact has not been great, because it's not been massive simply because of COVID. So people stopped traveling. And I think that the biggest driver for carbon footprint for our own company would most likely be the traveling that we do within Europe. And so obviously this has been a lot better, but I'm keen to see, how the figures look for 21 and 2022 when things start getting more to normal. But, I think more than anything else, what we're doing, I think it's a requirement of people's attitudes and just consciousness in general. So, for example, today I'm going to Munich. I'm living in Berlin, and I've made it a habit to take that 4.5 hour train from Berlin to Munich versus flying from Berlin to Munich, simply because it's so much more friendly. And I don't mind if it's a minor inconvenience of an extra hour or so that you spend in the train. I actually much welcome it, because really need to weigh what you can achieve with your own micro actions day by day versus going ahead and preaching to change the world if you're not willing to give your own part.
That's really, really cool. Maybe slowly starting towards wrapping it up. What kind of companies you guys invest in?
That's a super interesting question. And I think this could be a whole separate podcast on its own, yes. A whole different episode. But I think, to cut it short, I always like to say in German that we're a European VC Urgestein, and that basically means that we're that old ancient rock in the European venture capital space, because we've been around since the year 2000. And now, sort of having completed 21 years and this year 22 years, we're at our 8th fund life cycle for early stage. That's investments up to 600 million euros. And out of that early stage fund, we invest into seed and Series A of up to 20 to 25 million euros tops, starting out at ticket sizes of 1 million euros. But we've also raised a growth fund last year, and which we've announced mid of the year. And out of that growth fund, which is roughly a $700 million fund, we invest in Series C and beyond. And those would typically be ticket sizes starting from 25, 30 million and going up to 70, 75 million. And that's sort of the range that we invest in. So in short, we invest in companies across stages. So we've become sort of from an early stage VC to more of a multi-stage VC. And in terms of areas that we invest in, we're quite generalist per se. I think technology is at the core of what we do. So you'll not find us much in investing into companies that are low in technology. So always high in technology. And of course, everyone has their spikes. And what I'm more recently looking at, I mean, my personal background is actually that I'm a founder. So I founded a business before for 6 years in India in the e-commerce space, which was quite exciting to do. And I've seen sort of the goods and the bads of entrepreneurship, but that's again a whole different story. So what I'm really excited by right now are definitely companies in the food space, in the carbon tracking and impact space. Though in both of the areas we've done investments already, but we continue to be excited about the space. And apart from it, of course, looking more closely at solutions that are exciting for the B2B world, but at the same time looking at consumer companies as well in the quick commerce space. So one of the companies that we've invested into last year, where we also led the Series A, is Arrive out of Germany. But yeah, I guess at Balderton, because we're quite a strong and large team with over 25 people working on the investment side and over 35 people working to support our portfolio. Everyone has their spikes in areas that they really, really love.
Cool. Looking into this new year, what will be your kind of biggest ambition or the target to reach?
My biggest ambition and target to reach is that every company that we look at more closely is a company and a founding team for who reaching their own sets of sustainable future goals is top of agenda, despite what they do. Be it a fintech company, be it a consumer company, be it a B2B software company. I think it's important that everyone starts owning the conversation and driving the conversation on their own.
I think that's a very good point to wrap it up. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Awesome. Thank you, Tavo. Take care.
Join us again for the next episode. Thank you for listening. If you like the show, please give us a good rating and leave the feedback in your podcast player so others will find it too. We will be back next week. Turn on to Nature-backed Podcast.
So we love the Curse of the Lake House.
We love the curse.
Welcome to the Curse of the Lake House.
I am not a witch.
Really well written, keeps you guessing. I really like the ending.
Peter, otters mate for life too. Otters find the otter they belong with and they mate for life too.
The Curse of the Lake House. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
Electricast. Hot 95.
Serving the internet.
Hit radio.
Now, I know people listen to other radio stations. I just don't understand why. We have
Taylor Swift,
The Weeknd,
Ice Spice,
Metro Boomin,
Harry Styles,
SZA,
Ed Sheeran,
Drizzy Drake,
Miley Cyrus,
Ariana Grande,
and many more. Make Hot 95 your home for the hits. Download Autolist in the App Store, Google Play Store, and wherever apps are available.